faculty, lecturers, beloved staff, guest speaker Grace Lee, welcome. Today is a celebration of the resilience, brilliance, courage, creativity, mentorships, friendships, and most of all, deep learning that brought you to this moment. Wow. As a professional journalism school, we've taught you how to use sound and images, words and video, how to investigate, gather facts, and tell stories in the most powerful, resonant way. You represent the future of our profession. You will tell the stories and produce the important work and lead the charge in defense of democracy here in the US and abroad. But as you go forth into the world today, in that spirit and great expectation, I want to urge you to do the work on yourself. The therapy, the exercise, the meditation, the reading, the journaling, the walks in the woods, the prayer. Do whatever it is that helps you to cultivate the inner wisdom so easily compromised in a restless pursuit of excellence. Because fundamental to being able to be a good journalist is wise being. Fundamental to living a full life as opposed to a productive life is wise being. Wise being to enable wise seeing and wise effort. No doubt, after 2 years of arduous and expensive graduate study, securing a job and launching your professional career as journalists is the most coveted picture in your mind's eye. I say, class of 2022, you have survived the biggest health crisis. You are tenacious, you are innovative, you will find work. Beyond that, I believe it's possible to lead a full life balancing family, friends, and the incredibly consuming work of journalism, if you commit yourself to wise seeing, if you make it your life's mission to see yourself and the world around you with greater and greater clarity. My quest the past 30 years has been to practice journalism in the deepest, most meaningful way while raising 2 kids and taking care of 2 elderly parents in my home. How to navigate it all wisely was something I didn't always see clearly, though I tried. I remember in 2017, when I was a foreign correspondent covering South Asia, my dad begged me to stay home for his eye surgery, to not fly to Delhi to finish a story for the New York Times. But I felt pressured to go. I was on a tight deadline. The piece had to be published before the end of the year. It was November 30th, and I was almost out of time. And I remember the call I got in Delhi as I was sitting in my friend's guest bedroom working on a story. My dad had died of a heart attack the day after his surgery. I hadn't been able to see clearly enough back then. I was so laser focused on meeting my work deadline that I could not see it was possible to delay my trip by 2 days to support my dad during his surgery. I've been reading alum Rebecca Solnit's book, Orwell's Roses. She writes about World War II, Stalin, and Russia. How George Orwell saw the dangers of authoritarianism so clearly in the 1930s and 1940s when others did not. How Orwell saw Stalin for the monster he was. But most frightening to me is that many Western journalists, people who were independent of the Stalinist regime, people working inside Russia for Western democracies were so attached to communist ideology and hatred for capitalism, and for good reason, that they could not or would not see evidence of tens of millions of people being put to death for being intellectuals with different allegiances, scientists with worldviews that didn't comport with Stalin's, or simply being Jewish. These deluded journalists were living in Russia, reporting for American publications, and they still could not see it. These journalists were deluded because they saw what they wanted to see. They saw only those facts that confirmed their biases. Communism was a great and exciting experiment. Stalin was its leader. As journalists and as human beings, you are nothing if you cannot see clearly. And in order to see clearly, you need to first of all be able to see yourself. To know yourself, your biases, your triggers, your traumas. Know them well enough so you can recognize them in yourself, your worldview, and in others. Know them well enough so that you can set them aside in your quest for truth, so that you can approach each story, indeed each question in your life, with an open mind, or with as open a mind as possible, so that as you cover a protest or a purge, a government, a movement, an election, or a dispute, so that when you do that, you do more than only identify those facts, those elements of the story that confirm your own biases. Stalin is good. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Trump is a self-made man. Or for me, back in 2017, a looming deadline ruled out all possibility of delaying a work trip in order to accompany my dad to a surgery. The truth is, I was really scared of not finishing my story. The publishing deadline dominated my mind's eye. Ultimately, I was unable to assess the situation from all angles. I focused on the fact that my dad was having a minor eye surgery, that my mom would be by his side, along with a nurse to help take care of him. I did not focus on the fact that he was really scared, that my mom had dementia, that he didn't trust his nurse, and drew great comfort from having me advocate for him in hospitals, that he had such a weak heart that he couldn't even be put under anesthesia. To be a good journalist, or daughter, or good human being, you must commit yourself not just to becoming the best in the craft of storytelling, but also to a quest to becoming the wisest, most emotionally intelligent, most self-aware, and most open person you can be. Self-awareness is the foundation of good journalism and a good life. Journalism is not journalism if it's a quest to tell stories you believe to be true. It has to be a quest for truth itself. What's really happening? Who would know? Can I corroborate it? When we say talk to all sides, it doesn't mean believe all sides or even represent them all in a story. It means don't assume that the person in authority, or the person who shares your beliefs, or political ideology, or race or class is right, or that the person who triggers you is wrong. Go forth and be passionate, be courageous, be incredibly brilliant as you are. Fight for all voices to be heard. Fight to tell the stories that haven't been told. Fight to change our vitally important industry in this radically unequal world. But do so with your eyes wide open, seeing clearly, refusing to ignore evidence that challenges your suppositions or what you want to be true, refusing to believe people just because they're in authority or because their stories resonate with yours, realizing that unless you are clear-thinking, grounded, and aware of your own biases and those of the people around you, The work you do may produce beautiful, spellbinding, eloquent, evocative work, but it means absolutely nothing if it isn't true. Like me, you'll be pulled often by the care of loved ones. A few weeks ago, my 85-year-old mom who has dementia broke her ankle and needed to have surgery to fix it. She now lives with my sister in New York. My sister struggled as I stayed here, finishing up our advisory board meeting, our search for a senior assistant dean, my panel at the Logan Symposium. As I walked over to the symposium to moderate my panel, a text came through from my sister saying my mom had blood clots in her lungs and pneumonia, that she was talking to my dead father and her dead brothers. I saw with absolute clarity that I needed to go to New York to help take care of her. Wise seeing leads to wise effort. It doesn't mean sacrificing your career or your own life for elderly parents or young children. It means knowing when to focus on the work and ask others to help carry the load, and knowing when to drop everything and go take care of family. Only if you can see clearly can you make the best decisions for yourself, your family, your career, your stories, and your life. I could see clearly last week that I could leave town for a week and support my mom as she struggled to recuperate. And the school would go on, and my meetings could wait. And so my message to you, dear students, is to do the work to see clearly, and that starts with taking care of yourself. For me, that means a regular practice, as many of you know, of meditation and yoga, swimming laps at the Y, long walks in Tilden Park, writing quotes from Mary Oliver and bell hooks on my whiteboard. Do whatever it is that grounds you, opens your heart, opens your mind, that enables you to learn from your mistakes, to identify and set aside your biases, in the never-ending journey toward increasing self-awareness that is not only the foundation of great journalism, but a full and meaningful life. Thank you. In a slight departure from the plan, I just want to ask you all now to sit in a moment of silence. This is at the request from some of our graduating students. Sit in a moment of silence for Shireen Abu Akleh and other journalists in Ukraine and in Russia and around the world who've been killed or are being targeted as they try to do their jobs of bearing witness to the truth in an increasingly authoritarian world. Let's just hold a moment of silence. Next on our schedule, you'll hear from 3 students who've been voted to speak to you today, as well as our lecturer, Mike Shen, and our faculty member, Lisa Armstrong, who've also been voted to address you all today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, parents, family, guests, for sharing this space with us. Thank you, Dean Geeta Anand, for that great opening as well. And hello, class of 2022. I feel like I should be looking at you like this. This is funny, yeah. I told a lot of people I was going to do a roast of the journalism school in place of my speech, and that was just a rumor. That's not happening. I would never. In all seriousness, I do admit, though, comedy and just laughter in general was an important coping mechanism for me to get through these past 2 years. And I know that we all had our own ways of getting through this program successfully. And quite honestly, the proof is right in front of us. Friends from home, affinity groups, mentor relationships, and a whole lot of very real venting sessions and candid conversations in this very courtyard that all of you are sitting in right now. So all of that helped along our journey. But we did it. We made it to the finish line. But it wasn't easy. 2 years ago, we made the decision to go to graduate school at UC Berkeley and create compelling journalism during one of the most chaotic times ever. I can safely say that our first day of J200 was the most exciting and strange day ever. We were all able to hide our first day of school nerves because there were no in-person classes. We met each other online as small square boxes inside of Zoom screens, each of us with a unique background that shared only a fraction of our lives, our personalities, limited to a chat box and emojis. It wasn't great, and it didn't make sense. How were we supposed to practice a craft that requires being in the field, collaborating with our colleagues, and understanding the nuance of other people's personal stories? Everything that's at the heart of journalism, all from behind a computer screen. I don't know how the hell we did it, but we did. Woo, yes. We got out of our home offices, connected through public spaces, and found ways to safely share a meal with someone else. And even after our first year, while facing a pandemic in school, it didn't get easier. The first day of orientation for the first year class was our first day of school redemption, because we never had one, technically. We had to figure out how to socialize again, how to reconnect with our classmates, and figure out how to recommit ourselves to telling compelling stories. But this time we could do it in person. And although we were able to get out of the house, it was hard. We all felt the burnout, the late nights, the shame that came with begging for an extension on our stories. At one point, I was working on my final project this past year. And while we were all cramming at the last minute, finishing up editing sessions in the media lab, or putting the last touches together on our narratives, some of us even having job interviews, I, like many of us, had a moment where I thought I couldn't do this. I told my editor and my advisor for my project that I wasn't sure if I could do my story, that it was too hard. And then she said to me, "Of course it is. It's supposed to be hard. Because the stories we've chosen to tell are hard stories. And even in the face of adversity from the past 2 years, we've still chosen to do this work." And I thought about that, especially this past week, while watching, listening, and experiencing everyone's finished project during Showcase Week. We signed up to do hard stories, to do this work. And it takes courage, commitment, and some serious passion to do stories about grief, broken systems, complicated relationships, social justice, mental health, and real joy. But we stayed true to why we came to this program while facing so many unpredictable challenges. And we didn't let it get in the way. We held these issues close to us so we could tell these important stories while trying to figure out what we were going to eat for dinner that same night. And it wasn't easy, and it speaks to our resiliency as a cohort. Maybe arguably one of the strongest cohorts. I don't know. When I think of the resiliency of this class, I think of a quote from hip-hop and rap star / icon Megan Thee Stallion. Someone who has also finished their academic journey above all odds. Megan said, quote, "Once you really know yourself, can't nobody tell you nothing about you." End quote. I hope y'all will take some bit of that with you into your careers. I'm excited to see what all of you do. I'm honestly your biggest fangirl. And remember, we did that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here in the sun with us today to celebrate our graduation. Please help me give it up for the incredible class of 2022. Yes, you guys can do better than that. Come on. All right. Anyway, so it's truly a pleasure to be here all together. Finally at a point where we can stop and catch our breath and take a moment and really realize what we've all accomplished. I kind of feel like we've been sprinting nonstop since the moment we started this program. In fact, I have a pretty distinct memory of the night before we signed on to our first day of Zoom boot camp almost 2 years ago. I remember opening up our orientation instructions and nervously scanning the email for essential details so that I was fully prepared for everything that would await us the next day. The sign-off at the bottom of the email really struck me. I remember it said, "Be prepared to hit the ground sprinting." I don't know if it's because I had a more limited experience of the professional world in general at that point, or if I just had yet to breach the round-the-clock, tireless field of journalism specifically, but I had at that point never heard anyone describe something in a way that merited the modification of the phrase "hit the ground running" to sprinting. So it took me a long time to process that as a child who would routinely walk the mile in my high school. And so I'm here today to tell you that ultimately, for better or for worse, that was a completely accurate assessment of what we've all done here for the past 2 years. So 2 years, after our 2-year-long sprint, we can finally slow down, take a deep breath, and fully reflect on the extent of our accomplishments. This is a big moment for us all, and we really deserve to enjoy it. I know that in the hustle of the J world, in the late nights that Stephen mentioned, and the admittedly sometimes isolating and overwhelming nature of our program, it can become hard to appreciate the full weight of our work and our accomplishments. It's ultimately essential to realize that in qualifying the impact and quantifying the impact of our successes and achievements, we do not stop counting at their level of impact on us as individuals. I've come to really understand during my time at the J School that progress exists in a never-ending cycle of gradual improvement across time and space. Like most of the people here today, I'm not just up here for myself. Our spaces are the circles we live in and the communities that support us. We are up here fulfilling and delivering to anyone who has ever believed in and rooted for our success. I'm up here for my incredible mother and father who have tirelessly worked to support my ambitions so that they could be sharing this moment with me. I'm up here for my grandmother and my sisters, for every mentor, friend, and loved one who has taken time to dedicate to improving my well-being and genuinely cheering me on. We're up here for our sources who trust us to tell their most meaningful stories, and certainly we're expecting us to make it to this finish line today. So for all of them, we're up here delivering today. And it's not just that, but we're filling our destiny as part of this generational cycle of time, which has an immense weight that needs to be factored in as well. We're here for all the students that came before us, even just a year or two ago, who worked so hard to create the environment and resources that we're able to benefit from today at this school. And for the students that will come after us, who I hope will be able to reap some of the benefits of the movers and shakers of our class up here today. Some incredible people up here, truly. So I hope that they will also continue to push for a better experience for the students that come after them, as we have all done as well. We're playing a role in the fulfilling of greater destiny of all the work that the people have and will put in at the J School for years to come. So when you add up the value of that, all of that combined, it's actually quite a lot of value, something that no one could ever undermine. If I've learned anything from my 6-year tenure as a Berkeley student, other than the fact that it's egregious to wear a red hood on my graduation day, it is that how we create real change in this world is just by this, by contributing our own piece of the puzzle over time. We are here to honor our past selves for the act of investing into our future selves. And we have all been on a path headed toward this final destination for a very long time. At one point earlier this semester, I ended up in a room of extended family members which I hadn't been collectively congregated with in many years. In passing small talk at one point, the attention was turned on me and what exactly it is that I'm doing at this school. As I was explaining this wonky program to them, the flutter of recognition in their faces that the awkward, zany child who was notoriously turning cameras on everyone at our family gatherings was now actualizing my dream, and that filled my heart with affirmation. This is a moment of deep fulfillment in each of our own self-made journeys and destinies. So yes, when I say that we can finally let out a sigh of relief, I truly mean it. And after accomplishing so much, we can now go forward, finally graduate, put our work into the world. Ben can have his destination wedding, which I'm still waiting for my invite to. I want to take a moment to recognize the incredible work of our students. Every single thesis project I saw blew me away, truly. Can I hear it for the multimedia master's students for their adaptability and self-sufficiency? And for the international students who showed up to Zoom boot camp at 3 a.m. their time, but were sprinting alongside us nonetheless. Thank you to my advisors, Richard Cochi Hernandez and Xenia Prowell, for always walking alongside me, even if just in spirit sometimes. Thank you for my best friends and support system, Bella Fertel and Brittany Zendejas, for being the best J sibling and reporting partner I could ask for, respectively. Thank you to Gracelyn West, who inspires me every day with her incredible drive to stand up for those in her community. Thank you to everyone tuning in virtually to support me, even though it might not have fit into your schedule in a convenient way. Thank you to my parents, my mom and dad. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you guys proud. To my aunt and my cousin who are here today, and my grandmother, who has showered me with love since the moment I was born. And to my absolute blessing of a sister, Sarah. And to my sister, Leah, who's an absolute angel. I couldn't have done it with all of their love. Go Bears forever. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, class of 2022. I see y'all. I see y'all. Thank you, Stephen and Sabrina. Good morning, everyone. A few weeks ago, when we were in the thick of completing our master's thesis, a beloved instructor, Cassandra Herman, reached out to me just to check in. She asked me, how are things going? To which I replied about my thesis, change is a constant. Now, a lot of graduates here know what it feels like to have to pivot their story, have to pivot their journalism track, pivot their energy, and pivot their life. Considering that amongst us, some of our stories started with one idea and ended with another, considering that amongst us, some students shifted journalism tracks to secure additional support for the stories they knew needed to be told, or to meet degree requirements while juggling parenthood and family responsibilities. Considering that amongst us, some of the challenges of graduate school meant hitting pause on some of the commitments that we had in favor of protecting our health and responsibilities and energy. Considering that amongst us, some of us shifted time zones, leaving our families behind to be here and even shifting careers to commit to this work and to stand here before you in this moment. Change is a constant, and we're in the process of constant change. Change is a constant, and we're in the process of constant change. Wisdom teaches us that lasting change starts from within. To my colleagues, the class of 2022, we must interrogate our intentions and beliefs, and in our journalism practice, that's part of the story pitching process, isn't it? We ask ourselves, who am I to tell this story about this person or these people, or this community, or this issue? We ask ourselves, and we must, who am I in relation to? And who am I accountable to? We ask this because we do not exist as mere individuals. We ask this because we live within society and to serve a specific purpose. We must enrich our understanding of who we are as individuals in relation to the story, in relation to the people and communities who share of themselves with us in the pursuit of our work. We must seek to know our collective histories in relation to power and in relation to systems of oppression. Furthermore, how we define ourselves as journalists and story makers doesn't start or end with the thoughts that we conceive for ourselves. How we define ourselves as journalists is demonstrated through our work and the means to that end. It's demonstrated in how we show up in the lives of our story participants. It's demonstrated in the ways we care for ourselves and others. It's demonstrated. It's demonstrated in the ways we care for ourselves and support one another in the good times and in the most difficult of times. How we define ourselves as journalists and story makers is demonstrated in our impact. But I won't stop there. One of the lasting gems of knowledge that I received during my academic years many years ago was that systems don't work, people do. And so if our systems and our journalism institutions are to work as public services for the public good, if they are to work at all, if they are to train the next generation of storytellers, then it is the work of the people who make up these institutions. It is you and I who will make that happen. In the past 2 years, my colleagues and I persisted in our practice through the most precarious of circumstances. The class of 2022 stands before you today as professionals and collaborators who said yes to graduate school during a pandemic. And because of this historic global public health crisis, we've all witnessed the layers of inequality and inequities baked into the institutions that purport to serve us. And many of you have reported those stories on healthcare and education and immigration. But I know this. Amongst the graduating class of 2022 are people committed to truth-telling. And when I asked the graduating class of 2022 to share their thoughts about change within the J School and in the industry, they were clear. It is not only possible for us to co-create a more just future, it is our responsibility. Change is a constant, and we're in the process of constant change. Change is a constant, and we're in the process of constant change. So rise up, change makers. Congratulations, class of 2022.
These speeches are a very tough act to follow. I'm going to give a short speech, and hopefully you won't be shocked when it's over. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Shen, and I teach video editing here at the Journalism School. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the friends and family here for attending graduation today. Some of the graduates are launching their first careers, or shifting into second careers, or maybe even heading back to previous careers, hopefully refreshed by their experiences in graduate school. I've actually been in all of those places in my life, contemplating big changes, excited and nervous. I don't think I could have gotten through those moments without strong support from my friends and family. So thank you for being here for these amazing people. And to the class of 2022, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I feel truly honored. I can honestly say that I will never forget this class, not only because of the tenacity with which you weathered the pandemic and the incredible work that you produced. I have a personal reason to remember you. Although I've worked with students at the school for 10 years, most of that work has been one-on-one, advising documentary and short-form video students on their thesis projects. This year, for the first time, the school asked me to teach in a group setting, a class called Advanced Editing. This class was highly participatory, based around viewing, reading, discussion, and collaborative work. For those of you who joined me for that class, thank you for showing up every week. I was struck by your eagerness to learn, your original thinking, and the support you showed for your classmates and me by listening and responding thoughtfully to what we all had to contribute. In discussing editing with you, a craft that I love and that I've thought about on my own in a dark room for many years, I learned so much. If our class was successful, and I think it was, it's because it was about exploring and learning together, a process. It was not about me delivering lectures, a kind of product. I've been reflecting on this idea a lot because when I began my career, I didn't value process. I valued product. I understood you needed some kind of process to achieve a decent product, but I didn't value process in and of itself. My thinking has changed over the years. I've realized that works of journalism and documentary are ephemeral. They're not meaningless, but they are ultimately fleeting. And though we can hope that our work has impact, we can't always control that. But by placing value on our process, as journalists, artists, and makers, we can learn to find daily joy in our craft. We can weave our work into our lives in a way that is nourishing rather than draining. And we can make sure that who we are as journalists is also who we want to be as humans. There are so many times this year when I felt inspired by it and lucky to be part of your process. When your film made a huge leap forward, I admired not so much the aesthetic improvement, which, to be honest, is always subjective, but the daily diligence and attention to craft it took to achieve that improvement. But when your film, in my estimation, drifted sideways, backwards, didn't improve, but showed experimentation, a change in style or structure, a risk taken, I was no less in admiration of your process. I also think about ethics and personal values in terms of process. When you fell behind in your edit because you paused to assist a classmate, or to attend to a family emergency, or to a personal need outside of your film, I respected and learned from your process. When you didn't push someone to appear in your film because they felt uncomfortable or had too much else going on in their lives, I admired the values you were exhibiting once again as a kind of process. And when you shared your work with classmates and listened to their unique perspectives on what could be improved, there too, I think the value was not in improving your product. It was about engaging with others and building community, a perpetual process. A poet, Fabian Casas, wrote, "A method for writing should also be a method for living." I think that's true whether you're a writer, a photographer, an audio journalist, data visualization specialist, or a filmmaker. The point is not only the piece, it's about how we conduct ourselves as we make it. What we learn, how we grow, and best of all, who we get to meet. I feel so lucky to have met you. and I congratulate you, class of 2022. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Dear class of 2022, I'm honored and honestly a little surprised to have been selected as your faculty commencement speaker. I suspect some of you might have conspired with my J200 class who complained about the number of assignments I gave in the fall. Oh, you like assignments, Lisa? How about you write a 12-minute speech? I spent quite some time thinking about what I might say to you today that might be meaningful or useful, and that would feel authentic and not trite. To be frank, public speaking is not my thing. As I mentioned to some of you, I'm incredibly shy. The first time I ever stood up to my mother as a child and told her I was not going to do what she wanted me to do was after I'd won a national poetry contest. There was a monetary prize, and the expectation was that the winners would read their poems at a ceremony that was also going to be televised. I refused to do so. Now, I should pause here to say that my parents are from the Caribbean, and saying no to West Indian parents typically doesn't end well. But I was willing to take whatever the consequence, because to me, then, nothing would have been as bad as having to stand up in front of a room full of people and speak. One of the things I've been struck by in my short time here is how many of you will speak up. You will speak even when the fear is evident, when your voices quiver, when your hands shake. You will speak when you know it might cost you colleagues and perhaps friends. You will speak knowing full well that some people won't listen. And in that way, you and other students I've watched speak up in the years past with curious wonder have taught me something. It is better to speak. It is the only way forward. I'm going to share with you an excerpt of an essay by Audre Lorde, the self-described Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet, because I see it as the foundation for much of what I will share today. She was writing of her fear of speaking her truth and her recognition that her silence would not protect her. Once you start to speak, people will yell at you. They will interrupt you, put you down, and suggest it's personal. And the world won't end. And the speaking will get easier and easier, and you will find you have fallen in love with your own vision, which you may never have realized you had. And you will lose some friends and lovers and realize you don't miss them, and new ones will find you and cherish you. And at last you'll know with surpassing certainty that only one thing is more frightening than speaking your truth, and that is not speaking. You're going off into a world that has changed greatly since the time you began this program. A virus disrupted the lives of every single one of us in ways that we most likely could not have imagined. And the murder of George Floyd almost exactly 2 years ago also created a disruption, causing people to acknowledge the racism that has always been so clear to many of us. George Floyd's death led to this supposed racial reckoning, where people in newsrooms and journalism schools issued mea culpas and pledged to do better. There's also been a shift in recent years. I think that ideas about what journalism is and isn't are changing. I think we're beginning to see that the people who allow us into their lives to tell their stories aren't just, quote unquote, our sources, but people with their own sense of agency and expertise. And so there's at least been this recognition that things should change. But it's easier to say that change is needed than it is to actually enact that change. Changing this industry means that some people will need to cede power. It means doing things differently, which can be scary for some. But change, for me, is an inspiring thing, full of possibilities and hope. And a lot of my hope for this industry has come from you. You've mastered how to interview, research, and tell stories, but what I found most impressive is the introspection, the care you show for the people in your stories, the questions you ask, the way you push for journalism to be something different, for it to be something better. It's also your willingness to be vulnerable and honest, to say you don't know, but to state your determination to learn. At the beginning of the semester, I asked the students in my race and journalism class to write about how their racial identities play into how they see themselves as journalists. I'm going to share a snippet of one of your classmates said. I want to do this work for the public, but my identity is most similar to the people in media, leadership or otherwise, who have controlled so much space and let the public down. I don't want to perpetuate the system that people who look like me have created. As a journalist, I don't see myself in those people. I want to push to always be engaged in topics and conversations like this. Part of that is also recognizing my comfort level when it comes to stories. I have hesitated in the past to tell stories of people who belong to communities that I do not. Being who I am, I've thought, why would they ever trust me? I don't know that many journalists stop to ask themselves that. Why should anyone trust us, complete strangers who often show up when people are suffering through their worst moments? But it's a question that I think is at the heart of much of what we do as journalists. And it's a question I want you to continually ask yourselves. Who are you? Why are you telling these particular stories? Is it for yourself to have a credit in a prestigious outlet, to win a prize? Or is it to inform a community, to serve them, to demonstrate the inequities in the systems that control where and how we live, what access we have to food and healthcare and other basic things? I don't know that there are right or wrong answers here. What's most important is that you are honest about your motivations and that you're honest with the people you interview. It is your honesty, not the answers, that will determine whether or not people trust you, whether or not you get to the so-called truth. These are questions I'm always asking myself. Throughout my career, I've had countless people allow me to immerse myself in their lives. I spent about a week with a Maasai family documenting the coming-of-age ceremony of a 14-year-old called Josephine. I've been there when a man who was incarcerated at 17 walked out of the prison doors after 47 years behind them. I've been there for births, deaths, rapes, disappointment, redemption. I tell you this not to say, look at me, this intrepid journalist, but as someone who is humbled and eternally grateful. Never forget what a gift it is to have people invite you into their homes, into their lives, to share their joys, their triumphs, their failures, their pain. And now for the part where I do share some things that may be trite, but that I think are important. First, gratitude. If someone does something to help you, say thank you. And don't forget to thank the folks who don't often get thanked. There are folks here who do so much to keep this school running. I personally would not have been able to do certain things this past year without help from Julie, Rick, Charlotte, Massa, Chuck, Chris, and the rest of the staff here. So thank you. Two, I don't know that there's ever a point at which this work becomes easy. This, for me, is a timeline of pretty much every assignment. Do some reporting and pitch. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Sometimes there are more rejections in there. Then, yay, it's been accepted. I'll typically ask for as many words as I can get, and then have this moment of terror when I sit down and realize I have to write the, say, 6,000 words I asked for. There's writing, fact-checking, a lot of procrastination in between, likely some tears. But good journalism takes time. Good journalism is hard. This third one is something you might be tired of hearing. You've chosen a tough career. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, your ability, your wisdom in having chosen to be a journalist. You may have preconceived notions about what you are and aren't good at. Find a way to overcome those voices, and find your way. Your way might not look like the path taken by the person sitting next to you, but there is no right way, just the one you create for yourself. I'd like you to today, if you haven't already, take some time to write, record, or in some way document who it is you are as a journalist. Who do you want to be? Be grand and brave as you imagine your path. You've produced the best of your work in your thesis, but what more do you hope to accomplish? Let that be your guide, but do not hold so tightly to it that you close yourself off from possibilities and change. Do not let who you've been told a journalist is supposed to be prevent you from dreaming beyond what you see. And to that point, the world will see some of you as being just and whatever word follows. At my very first job out of grad school, I was a fact checker, but I knew I wanted to write. But when I tried to go through official channels to get more writing opportunities, there were people who saw me as just a fact checker. And side note, being a fact checker was one of the best ways for me to start out. It made me a better reporter and a fastidious fact checker of my own work. But I went to an editor and pitched her stories, and she is the one who gave me a chance. Essentially, I took on extra work. And this editor continued to give me more assignments because I did solid work. Now, to be clear, I am in no way saying that's the way it should be, We should all be valued. We should all be given the opportunity to live and work to our full potential. But in the absence of that utopia, when you find that there are people standing in your way, go around them. Try not to expend too much energy fighting them. And when that door is opened, even just a crack, use that brilliance to push it wide open. I'm going to go back now to clarify something that I said at the beginning. When I talked about speaking up, I was talking about all of you who've had the courage to do so. I go back to the town hall meeting we had in March where there was discord, there were tears, there was a lot of anger and hurt. And as I said then, the fact that so many of you showed up tells me something. You care. I can say from having spoken with several of you one-on-one, folks who in that meeting appeared to be on opposing sides, that you care about journalism, you care about this school, and while it might not have been apparent, you care about each other. Whatever side you were on, that meeting was about pushing each other to be better. Yes, to be better for and to one another, but as Bashira so wisely noted, be better for the communities you will cover. Disagreements, even ones that are messy and uncomfortable, are opportunities, but only if we are willing to listen and learn. Facts and data are important, but they don't really get at the heart of the story, the emotion, the reasons, the why. For instance, assuming the facts I have here are correct, there are 50 of you up there now. But that number doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me that Elena is an incredibly sensitive and gifted audio storyteller, or that Derica is, I'm told, the FOIA queen, and not only killed it with her own thesis, but spent countless hours helping her classmates finish their own. That number doesn't tell me that Sabrina has this incredible drive and sense of obligation that has allowed her to push through despite some devastating circumstances. Or that Ari has an insatiable curiosity about new ways to use data, AI, and machine learning, and is deeply engaged in helping his classmates. The story of the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism class of 2022 is not a number. It is who you are as individuals. It is who you are as a group. And so yes, go create great journalism, take risks, be bold, shake this industry up and rebuild it. But remember you are part of a community, perhaps an imperfect community that is still finding its way, a community where you must speak up to push each other to be better, but a community nonetheless. Because as Audre Lorde wrote, and these are snippets of various things I put together, without community, there is no liberation, but community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist. The fact that we are here and that I speak these words is an attempt to break that silence and bridge some of those differences between us. For it is not difference which immobilizes us, but silence. And there are so many silences to be broken. Congratulations, and thank you.
I want to introduce our guest speaker, Grace Lee. Welcome, Grace. Grace is an independent producer and director and writer working in both narrative and nonfiction film. She directed the Peabody Award-winning documentary, American Revolutionary: The Evolution of Grace Lee Boggs, which The Hollywood Reporter called an entertaining, revealing portrait of the power of a single individual to effect change. The film premiered at the LA Film Festival, where it won its first of 6 audience awards. Her previous documentary, The Grace Lee Project, won multiple awards, broadcast on the Sundance Channel, and was called ridiculously entertaining by New York Magazine, and a funny but complex meditation on identity and cultural expectation by Variety. Grace argued in an important essay that PBS should support and promote more filmmakers of color. She helped organize a group of filmmakers who wrote an open letter challenging PBS to release data on filmmakers who have worked with the network. For the power of her filmmaking and the power of her advocacy for changing who gets to be a filmmaker in this world, I want to welcome the passionate and courageous Grace Lee.
How's everyone doing? These guys look really hot over here, so I won't take too much time. Thank you, Dean and Anand, for that warm introduction, and to all the faculty, families, friends, and most of all, the class of 2022. Thank you for inviting me to share a few words with you. It's truly an honor to be here at the Berkeley School of Journalism. It's especially meaningful because when I was in college, I actually dropped out of journalism school. Don't worry, it wasn't this one. So this opportunity to celebrate your graduation and rest on your laurels is pretty special. I had a chance to meet some of you yesterday and watch a few of your documentaries, and wow, you are an impressive and talented bunch of people. I have so much respect for you, and listening to everyone else speak, I can't wait to hear more. It's been tough trying to figure out what to say to a group of journalists in a time when fact-based knowledge and information are under attack, when journalists are being targeted or even killed simply for doing their jobs. How do you even generate the energy to report on, document, and interpret a world in crisis when there are days I just want to hide under the covers and binge watch the Great British Baking Show? Class of 2022, you know what I'm talking about. As has been said many times, you started your graduation education remotely during a global pandemic, in the wake of the George Floyd uprisings, followed by the 2020 elections, the January 6th insurrection, with new COVID variants screwing up your plans every which way. On the upside, these setbacks have taught you to be resilient, how to improvise, and how to keep going when it feels like everything everywhere is falling apart. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and quote from someone I had the privilege of making a film about, as Dean Anand said, Grace Lee Boggs. For those who don't know her, she was a Chinese-American writer and philosopher who for 70 years was rooted in social justice movements, primarily in the Black community in Detroit. She died at age 100 in 2015, but Grace would often open a meeting or an event with this question: what time is it on the clock of the world? Think about that for a second. What time is it on the clock of the world? So many of the institutions we've taken for granted are having a moment of reckoning. But this is the time, as Grace liked to say, for reimagining those institutions. That's why back in the summer of 2020, when the Ford Foundation asked several artists and thinkers to write a 500-word essay about the future of our field, I decided to write about an institution that has profoundly shaped me, and maybe some of you, PBS, the Public Broadcasting System. My main question, which still persists today, is why is PBS so white? And what would it take to restore the public to public broadcasting? I ask this question as someone deeply invested in a system that gave me many opportunities, but it's an institution that has been stuck in the past and unable to really embrace the seismic shifts that are facing our field, not to mention this country. I'm not going to get into the details of the podcast. You can listen to it by yourselves. It's called Viewers Like Us, and you can get it wherever you listen to your podcast. I want to use the rest of my time here to just share a few things I learned from working on Viewers Like Us that I hope will be useful to you as you continue along your storytelling paths. First of all, I learned that I could do it. I had never made a podcast before, but while we were all stuck in our homes during lockdown, I thought, why not? The lesson, which applies to so much of documentary filmmaking, was just jump in. After the last two projects I made were big multi-part series that took years to raise the budgets and produce, I got back to the bare bones. I had a USB wireless microphone, a laptop, and a high-speed internet connection, the means of production. But I also had the right team willing to jump in too. Working remotely from LA, Oakland, New York, and Portland, after a year on Zoom and Slack. Olivia Almer, the producer, is someone I just met in real life for the first time yesterday. She flew in here from New York. And Joaquin Alvarado, who I saw over there, my homie from film school 20 years ago, is the one who pushed me out of my comfort zone with the simple words, how about you turn that essay into a podcast? I learned so much from my 20-something peers on Viewers Like Us, as much as I learned from the veteran radio producers guiding us along the way. So this is my second piece of advice. Learn and work intergenerationally, especially when you're tackling a story that predates your existence. Some of you may know editor Cheryl Duvall, a 40-year veteran working in radio and audio production. Yes, Cheryl. So many of our conversations had nothing to do with the episodes we were working on, but her perspective on public media, just like Olivia's and reporter and co-host Akatunde Ahmad's vantage points as 20-somethings who rarely watch public television, were indispensable. Having an inclusive intergenerational team is what's up and what you'll need if you want to tackle big questions, like what to do with our failing institutions. It's no secret that many of our public institutions are in crisis. Our public schools, the public health system, the prison system. We're here at the University of California, one of the most prestigious public universities in the world. But what does it owe the people of California, to the community that is the Bay Area? What does it mean to serve the public? Here's another thing I know. Public institutions are for us. Public broadcasting is yours, just like this university is yours. And the way it stays public is our involvement and pushing it to the next place it needs to go, which sounds like what many of you have been doing here. So many questions arise about whether we're just willing to tear down the old structures, or are we willing to figure out how they can evolve? Can we be creative problem solvers to help our pillar institutions move beyond these reckonings, or have we just decided that we need to build from scratch? I don't have the answer, but I also learned how scared people are to talk about systemic inequality and racism, because the power structures that dominate this country are real, present, and not going anywhere or changing anytime soon. I know lots of great people in public television, people who I know were in total agreement with what we reported, but very few of them wanted to stick their necks out. The fear of losing their jobs, their security, the fear of being uncomfortable is real. So what do I do with this information? Because we're still living through this story and where it goes. To conclude, I want to leave with you with a few questions, because I obviously don't have the final answers for anything. For example, what will you do in your journalism practice to make sure your teams are inclusive and equitable? You have the skills and experiences you learned here at Berkeley from your teachers and from your peers, but how and with whom you make the connections between history and the present, between facts and opinion, is critical. How will you pass the baton on a story that you helped crack open? It's not enough for one person or one podcast to pursue an ongoing investigation that may take years. It'll take you, me, your peers, my peers, to continue asking these questions in whatever shape they may take. By the way, if anyone wants to talk more about this, please see me afterwards. Finally, how do you constantly reconsider and reset your goals and objectives as you pursue a story? This one's easy. For months, I thought my objective was to get Ken Burns or the leadership of PBS to talk with me. I still haven't given up hope, but when I got the invitation to connect with you all, because of Viewers Like Us, I realized that the impact of what we started was bigger than just talking to them. Because we are continuing the conversation and pushing the work forward and building these networks, knowing that we were able to connect previous generations in this endeavor is one that is incredibly meaningful. Finally, if I have just one more piece of advice, or maybe it's a request, it's this. While you're building your diverse intergenerational teams and communities and support networks, don't forget to uplift others coming along the way. It's how we keep it going. I'll leave you with a story that I hope illustrates this. Back in 2019, I directed 2 episodes of The Asian Americans, a 5-part PBS series about Asian American history. One of the episodes was about the birth of consciousness and the Asian American movement in the 60s. We filmed in San Quentin prison, where I met a young man, I think he was 27 at the time, named Tan Tran, who told me he was learning how to make films. We stayed in touch over the last 2 years, and I learned that inside he was helping start a filmmaking collective, documenting the lives of men like him who are incarcerated. You probably all know that the prison is also a public institution, but it's also generating newspapers, podcasts, music, and short films. And to bring all these strands together, the guys here had seen my work because guess what? Public television, PBS, is one of the few platforms you can see in prison because it's public media and it's free. Tan showed up in my episode of Asian Americans, and he got to see himself, and that's part of the mission. And just last week, he was released after 10 years incarcerated, and will continue to make films and find a way to do it with the crew inside. That crew and their project is called Forward This. You can check it out on Instagram and social media. And Forward This is what I encourage all of us to do together. At this time on the clock of the world, it's how we will not only survive, but it's how we'll thrive. Congratulations to all of you. I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
I want to invite our Emeritus Professor Bob Kalo to come up here and say a few words to honor Sam Grant.
This is a little weird because I don't know any of you, but I feel like I do because what emeritus means is that you're still part of the faculty, but you just don't work anymore. So that's what that means. And I forgot the first rule of Berkeley graduations, the hat rule. So we call that the heat stroke section over there. So take care of yourselves because I wasn't sure I was going to make it this far. And so if I go, one of you trained in something will save me. I'm here really briefly to celebrate Sam Grant, who is also in the heat stroke section, who is ending a 15-year time as an instructor here at the J School. Why am I doing it? Because in 2005, she was a student here, and she was part of the class of 2007. 2007 is an important year. Why? YouTube was 2005. Facebook was 2004. We were in the middle of a period of terror, technological terror. There were other terrors to come, and I think in some ways you guys are dealing with the other terrors to come, but it was clear that things were changing, and we weren't sure of how to teach. We weren't sure of what our students were going to be doing. We couldn't see the future. So we needed different kinds of people, and Sam, as a student, was already unusual because she had already started a production company. She had already seen herself as an owner, an entrepreneur, a woman in business, a woman producer. So she kind of came a bit as a pioneer and a new model for what journalism was going to be like, especially in the world of video. The wheels were coming off this old model. And you're on the other side of that part of it, and it's intriguing because just, TikTok hadn't been invented, YouTube, the streaming didn't exist the way it does now, so everything was really different, and we needed to rethink everything. And in a lot of ways, Sam's versatility was a model as a student, and kind of helped us, because as has been mentioned, institutions change slowly. People are invested in the past. They're invested in older ways of thinking. As a student, she was kind of a crackerjack. Her work was incisive, polished, and propulsive. And she made the most of her time at the J School and helped us all adapt to a bit of a new reality. So her documentary project, A Fragile Trust, later became a PBS documentary and is now kind of part of the canon of ethics education. But this idea of student work being not student work, that really hadn't happened that much around here. So that's something. And then her other work since then, this is all while she's working here for 15 years. A documentary out of Sierra Leone, an environmental documentary in Paraguay called Daughters of the Forest. All of these things were kind of the new model of working in film and doc. And in all cases, examples of how to make stories travel and endure and live. So now, I just really want to say something. Add to all that, 15 years of service here at Berkeley. Add to all that, figuring out a way of raising a family while you're doing that. So I really simply want to ask you all to join me in thanking Sam Grant for her years of service, her excess of talent, and her generosity of spirit. Thank you, Sam.
We're going to take a minute before we present the candidates for the Masters of Journalism to honor, firstly, just our staff in general. Lisa began this, but let's take a moment to just honor the incredible staff at the journalism school who made all of this great work possible. We have a few beloved members of our staff who are leaving our staff this year, and we want to take just a minute to honor Julie Hirano, who... Okay, there... So Julie, we... Julie is a blur, a vision dashing from one end of the school to the other with a smile on her face, always kind, and we'll miss you more than we can possibly say, Julie. Michelle Kerr, our student advisor. Michelle, we know how much you love working with students, and please know that love and the passion and compassion you share for them will endure, and we will miss you terribly. Tracy Pasquadi, who is here, our head. Our school, it's the people who change our school, and your passion for equity and inclusion and diversity and justice helped transform our school and made us what we are today. So we're very grateful to you, Tracy. I want to honor also two, Pam Gleason and Annette Garcia, who aren't here today but are also departing our school, and just give them applause. And then I know we're all baking, and so I will just say quickly that I wouldn't be able to do my job and the school wouldn't be functioning if it weren't for the endless energy and willingness to do everything and anything that Associate Dean Jeremy Roux embodies. And so I just want to honor Jeremy's can-do attitude. Our other Associate Dean, Lisa Armstrong, who in her very first year agreed to be Associate Dean of DEIBJ. Thank you, Lisa, for all of your incredible work. And Andres Seriel, who's co-chair of the faculty, who's transformed how we do admissions at this school. Thank you, Andres, for just your incredible work. I could go on. Let me just thank the faculty and the lecturers who are seated here for just their incredible passion and dedication. With that, we are going to present the candidates for the Master in Journalism. Jeremy Roux will read the names.
Here. All right. So, as I read your name, please come up. And first row, we're going to go by row. So first row, we have Stephen Rascon. Sabrina Armagon Karazi. Bashira Mack. Isabella Fertel. Brittany Zendejas. Elizabeth Moss. Subuk Hasnain. Gracelyn West. Elena Neal Sachs. Eleonora Bianchi. William Frederick Brewster. Matthew Miranda. Francisco Martinez Cuello. Arjit Douglas Sen. Katie Lakari Kozak. Eliza Partika. Leslie Cosme Torres. Sasha Hupka. Brian Howie. Noah Boston. Kenneth Kipruto. Brian Wynn. Thomas Bruns. Sego Khan. Carolina Galbietti. Lei Hema Gardner. Injung Kim. Idris Mukhtar Ibrahim. Joey Paran. Manish Kanal. Cameron Nielsen. Megan Elizabeth Bergeron. Talia Mindich. Melissa Perez Winder. Tamira Moore. Nahima Schaefer. Darika Bennett. Michaela Bachia. Nakia Daste. And Marshall Chalmers. Margaret Cullen. Zachary Fletcher. Sophie Cogner. Dolan Mello. Izzy Bloom. Carly Olson. Ben DeRico. Jocelyn Tabunkai Guthrie. Xinghee Kong. And with that, I give you the class of 2022